Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz here from the Overflow Room. I think an appropriate location to talk about a topic that I've wanted to discuss for some time, which is what makes a great record review, or a good record review, or even a competent and professional record review. I've had a lot of time to think about this, and I want to share it with you because I think today, with the internet and social media and all that, there needs to be a statement of principles. The critical profession is at its absolute lowest ebb, absolutely decayed and decadent. And, everybody thinks who's got a record collection that they know how to do record reviews. And anybody thinks if they have an opinion or they've heard two performances of something, they can do record reviews. And they can. There's nothing stopping anybody. Hell, you can go on YouTube and start your own channel. And who's going to gainsay it, right? Seriously, it's a tough situation when there are no standards, because there's just this insane proliferation of media that allows everybody a voice with which to express themselves. I'm not saying that you need to be trained in a certain way or come from a certain school in order to be a critic, in order to be a good critic, but I think you do need to have a certain attitude. And I think the situation with recordings particularly is different than that from concerts. And I know I've talked about this before, but I think I want to focus specifically on the record review as an entity, because it really is a unique form of expression, let's put it that way, form of critical expression, and one that I very, very few critics, I think, have mastered. And I don't want to be arrogant and say, well, I have, but I have a certain fund of experience. And I think that fund of experience counts for something. And I've been around a while. And so I'm going to pretend like I know what I'm doing. And if you think I don't, well, okay, that's your opinion. But here's the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. First principle. Criticism of any kind is a form of entertainment, just as the thing which is being criticized. It's all entertainment of a type. It may be serious entertainment. It may be deep. It may be profound. But it is entertainment. And therefore, entertainment matters. Delivery matters. If you're writing, style matters. We don't read Bernard Shaw's criticism these days because Bernard Shaw was right. No one thinks he was right in thinking Brahms' German Requiem was a piece of crap. No, nobody. But it's fun as hell to read him tell you that Brahms' German Requiem was a piece of crap, because stylistically he was an amazing writer. And so style never hurts. If you want to be read, if you regard the critical medium as a work of art in itself, then you have to master that medium. And that means mastering the written word or having some kind of entertainment value as a public speaker on YouTube, which I hope I do, since I just sit here as a rank amateur, technically just talking. This is something you got to have. So that's the first thing, before we even get to the content of what the review is going to say. Now, when you're talking about record reviews, there are a few things the critic has to have. Has to have. One. I already did one, but this is the other one. He has to have, or she, excuse me, I know we have to be politically correct. They. Oh, I can't do it. He. Sorry, he. I'm a he. I do he's. Women can do she's. He has to have a mastery of the discography. You have to know what the discography of the work in question has been. And that is extremely difficult these days. One of the problems I always had reading gramophone reviews, because I could tell right away, was that the critics often did not know the discography. One of the reasons they didn't, I found this really fascinating when I found this out, was that Gramophone magazine kept all of their reviewer copies. They would give a CD out, the reviewer would review it, and then return it to them. And the CD would go into Gramophone's own endlessly huge, I assume, library of recorded music. But the critic couldn't keep the disc. And that was a real problem, because unless the critic bought the thing, they would never hear it again. And would you do a review of a recording of something that let's say it has 5 or 10 versions out, you've got to have a critical mass of them, and you've got to be able to make A-B spot comparisons in real time. Or else your memory will play you false. It plays me false. You've caught me when my memory played me false. And I remember those moments vividly. You can't even, and I own the recordings most of the time. It's very, very hard to be intelligent about your comments when you talk about a recording if you don't have the comparative recordings. You could very easily go wrong, or the review itself simply appears in a no man's land of unmeaning because you can't make the appropriate comparisons, the necessary comparisons. And that's a real problem. It's a real problem. It was from the beginning. It's an even bigger problem now. It's not so much an issue when you're dealing with rare repertoire, pieces that don't have a huge discography, because then everybody knows what the performances are. But that is becoming less and less frequent these days. If you want to talk about music that people care about, and let's face it, most people want to hear about Beethoven before they want to hear about, Sterndale Bennett or any other composer, who is not in the canon. And now it's impossible. It's impossible to have a complete knowledge of the discography of the basic repertoire that's meaningful, that you can use, that you can work with. I mean, let's say you have every recording of the Eroica or every recording of Mozart's G minor symphony that's ever been made. You can own them all, and you get a new one. How much time are you going to spend comparing the new version to all of the others that you have before you have to say something, before you have to write a review? It's a horrible situation. It really is. And so what is a critic supposed to do? A critic has to have not just one reference recording, but you have to have a perspective of what you like, what kind of interpretation you like, and which performances sort of fall in that category. And you have to have just a critical mass, a representative sample of the discography that I think shows the interpretive variety and options and legitimate possibilities of the work in question. You can't cover everything. You simply can't. But you can at least give people an idea of what your points of reference are. And you've got to have more than one. It's silly to just say, well, my reference is George Szell. Well, okay, it may be your favorite, but George Szell was not the be-all and end-all in Beethoven or Brahms. So you have to show some awareness of the wider discography and what's been going on. And frankly, these days, if you find young critics out there, and I hate to say it because critics have to start somewhere, be careful. I mean, they can do it, but it's a lot more work if you're starting out than it is for someone like me who's been doing this stuff for nearly 40 years. I mean, it really makes a big difference. Having a good memory helps too. And I have a trick memory when it comes to music. I remember almost everything I heard musically. That's a gift. But seriously, it's a very, very difficult thing to do now, to be able to say something meaningful about a new recording of the basic repertoire. The same thing happens, frankly, when we come to the box sets. I know I'm going to have to talk about box sets. I've got the Ormandy set, 120 CDs. I've got Grumio, 74 CDs. I've got Previn, it's 100 and something CDs. I'm going to have Muti, 90 something CDs. John Elliott Gardner, 100 and some odd CDs, plus DVDs, plus, What are you supposed to do with one of these boxes? I could wait. I could listen to all 120 Ormandy mono CDs and then do the review in, 2075. Or I can spot check and hope that I know what I'm talking about. Or I can rely on my memory of a lot of them. Thank God I know a lot of them. And listen to some of the other things that really interest me. And then give you my best estimate. That's all we can do. It's all we can do. I mean, the labels are tossing this stuff out. And look what happened. Look what happened with the Grumio set. You're the ones who told me that there was a problem with one of the discs, that they duplicated one of the discs. I doubt I would have known. I would have done the review and felt like an ass because I don't know if I would have noticed. I probably wouldn't have felt like listening to 3 recordings of the Beethoven Violin Concerto to make sure that they were all different. But one of you did. And that's the only way we would know. I mean, technically, technically, as a critic, I feel an obligation to listen to every single disc every time it's reissued, all the way through from beginning to end, to make sure that everything is exactly as it should be and as it says it is. But the reality is that if I did that, I would be stuck on one box for the next month and a half and would be able to do nothing else. And that would drive me crazy, and probably you as well. And I'm not sure at the end of the day that what I finally said would be any more meaningful, because you would just say, I disagree, or I like that one better, and that would be the end of it anyway. So the record critic today is really facing one heck of a serious challenge. But I think getting to know the discography before you open your mouth, generally speaking, is a wise piece of advice. And I would say to any younger critics coming out there, you can do this. You can do this. You can review Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, but you've got to do a lot of listening first. And all of this stuff is out there now. I mean, it's available for digital download. Fortunately, you don't have to have an overflow room. You can listen to performance after performance, but you've got to do it. And you've got to read other reviews. You've got to read criticism. You've got to read what other people say. And you've got to find people whose opinions you trust and value in describing performances. And that brings up the next point, which is point number 3 or 4 or 5. I don't know, whatever we are. It's the next point. The next point is this. I tell this to all of the critics who write for me at Classics Today, and I've always felt very strongly about this. Your opinion as a critic doesn't matter. Now, you may say that I'm the biggest hypocrite in the world just for pointing this out, because I certainly express opinions, and I express them very strongly, and I really think they matter, and I think I'm right. I do think I'm right, but that's not the point. The point is that the critic's first job is to describe musical facts. That is what the performers do. Is this speed too slow compared to that speed? Did the composer write this in the score and the performance do that? Is the trumpet out of tune in bar 75? Now, in these kinds of informal talks, I have to confess, I'm a lot less detailed than I normally would be if I were writing. On the other hand, I can talk about more things more quickly than I can when I'm writing, because when I'm writing, I have to keep everything down to a few paragraphs, and I have to pick my examples. Here, I can be a lot more general, but I can speak about other things. So each medium has its own particular challenges. But the point I want to make clear is that the opinion that comes somewhere in the course of the review, whether the beginning, the middle, or the end, and however strongly or entertainingly or controversially expressed, has to arise from the facts of the performance. Whether you like it or not doesn't matter, but what you say about the performance factually has to be true. It must be true. If I tell you conductor X is faster than conductor Y, or conductor Z accents a passage and conductor B doesn't, then damn it, that's the truth. That is the factual truth. What you make of those facts may be completely different from what I make of those facts, but they are facts. And that is what gives a critic and a piece of criticism credibility. I mean, if you haven't given evidence that you've listened, that you've understood what you've listened to, that you can talk about what you've listened to or write about what you've listened to with clarity and correctness, what use is a piece of criticism? It's of no use at all. It may be fun to watch. It may be good entertainment. Some of the things I do are no more than that. I admit it. I admit it freely. But behind everything, there has to be that understanding that you should be able to describe the facts of a musical performance and why they matter in terms of your final opinion. Because criticism is not autobiography. That is my big line to all of the critics I work with. I tell them, criticism is not autobiography. No one cares about what you had for lunch. No one cares about whether your cat was having a bad day. And mine sometimes did, and I've discussed it. Although sometimes my cat has a bad day because of a certain performance. But the point is that whatever examples, however colorful, I just can't say this often enough, especially to you budding critics out there on the internet, you have to talk about facts. And you have to understand how those facts relate to the performance, to the work. Now that, of course, is something else. Either you understand the music or you don't understand the music. You as listeners will have to determine whether the critic in question is rolling off a list of facts because he wants to sound impressive and because he really has listened, or whether he understands how those facts collaborate to create a good or poor performance of the work in question. I mean, but fundamentally, that's what you need to do. There has to be that basis in fact of everything that a critic does. And so when I read a record review, I look for facts. And I mean, I read tons of reviews. I read reviews all the time. I'm very interested in what my other colleagues are doing. And when I hear a performance, I mean, I go back, I listen to what they wrote about, and I want to see that I hear what they said. And that is one of the ways I judge their credibility, because you don't have to agree with anything a critic says. I don't care. I mean, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But the useful information is whether or not the critic describes the parts of the piece that I care about or the moments that I care about and describes them accurately, because then I can decide whether I think I'll like the performance or not, or whether it's something I want to hear. Because remember, we're talking about consumer products here. We are not talking about anything metaphysical. We're talking about a physical product that someone's going to pay for, and they can buy product X or they can buy product Y. And if you tell them to buy product X, you have to explain why. You have to tell them what they're going to get. So finally, at the end of the review, or the end purpose of the review, you give a judgment. The critic gives his opinion. Is it good? Is it bad? Is your money best spent elsewhere? What else can you do? This is why I think record criticism is actually meaningful, potentially meaningful, because we have so much choice. We're just overwhelmed with choice these days. And so we can there's so many different ways to spend your entertainment dollars. And I know from how you've written to me, you're asking me, I have to buy this or this. I can't get both. Which should I get? I can't tell you which one you should get. I hope I can say enough about it so that you can decide which one you should get. That's the point. It's not about what I like. It's what you're going to like. And some of you who like the things that I like, of course, you can trust me for that. But those of you who don't, you should still be able to make a decision, hopefully, based on the fact that we don't agree about everything. But I wanted to do this talk now that we're sort of coming to an end and winding it down, because I just feel that this profession, which I love so well and which I've been doing now for so many decades, it's really, really in bad shape. And it's in bad shape not because of technology and not because the record companies have gone insane, but because of a lack of standards in the people doing the criticism. A lack of standards, or a lack of a firm ideology, a firm philosophy of what criticism ought to be and how to make it meaningful and useful to your viewers or your readers, to the people who you're speaking to. You always have to remember, as I said before, this is not autobiography. You're doing this for somebody. You're not doing it for yourself. You're not doing it to talk about how wonderful you are, how much you listen to, how big your overflow room is. You're doing it in the hope that somebody who's at the other end, the receiving end of your criticism, will see it, hear it, read it, and say, aha, I recognize that. That's something I understand. That's something I hear. And that, I think, is the greatest reward you can get as a critic, when someone says, yes, you said this and I heard that. I think that is absolutely wonderful moment. It gives me a thrill, absolutely a thrill. So that, my friends, is my philosophy of record reviewing. I know I've talked at length now, and I hope it wasn't too boring, but I wanted to put it out there, because I think people need to think about it. And especially these soi-disant internet people who claim to be critics. Think about what you're doing. It matters. And it can matter a lot more if you adopt a certain level of professionalism before you open your mouth. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.